This episode of Gators Breakdown is brought to you by MyBookie. Double your first deposit up to $1,000. Head to mybookie.ag and use promo code GATORS to activate the offer. Bet, win, get paid at MyBookie.
Gators Breakdown, the Gators fan podcast, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SCC. On this episode of Gators Breakdown is a preview of the Kentucky Wildcats, and joining me for that will be Kevin McGuffy of Last Word on Sports, Last Word on College Football. And after that, I'll break down the game how I see it playing out. Before we get there, remember you can find Gators Breakdown on news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. There you'll find all the Gators Breakdown episodes, as well as articles from the News4Jax sports team. Catch Gators Breakdown on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. When using those services, please share, rate, and review the show. Go rate and review the show, guys. Please, there's a lot of good out there to see those reviews. Let everybody know what they're getting in Gators Breakdown. Let's Gator Nation know what they're getting with the podcast. And on social media, follow Gators Breakdown on Twitter and Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Also, every week, Talking with Troop, a News4Jax exclusive. Former Gators tight end Ben Troop joins me once a week this season on News4Jax and gives his thoughts like only he can. You know, he brings it every time Ben speaks his mind and lets us all really know, what he's thinking going on with the Gators. And you can catch that every week exclusively on news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. Kevin McGuffy, who covers the Kentucky Wildcats and college football for Last Word on Sports, joins me now here on Gators Breakdown to give us a look into the Kentucky program. Kevin, take us back to a year ago. Kentucky ended the streak versus Florida in the celebration and jubilation of finally getting that monkey off the back.
I tell you what, it was the most, that whole night was just, surreal. Not only, I think, well, maybe when we talked last year, I said, you asked me about the streak, and I was like, it's going to happen in like the most, the weirdest way when nobody expects it to happen. And that's exactly, what happened. They went down into the swamp and, pretty much, dominated the game. Terry Wilson, who I'm sure, we're going to talk about, his first ever SEC game, he threw for almost 300 yards. Benny Snell had a huge game. Then, Josh Allen, helped dominate on the defensive end. And we're just like, we're just sitting watching the game. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're actually going to, Kentucky is going to win. They're going to, they're going to snap this streak. And it was just, they didn't maybe not party like winning an NCAA championship, but still it was, the most, it was just such a great thing to see, 31 years. I was there, I did a post last year for Last Word about, I did it was rough to do, but I did like the most, gut wrenching losses to Florida or something like that. And I realized I was at, 3 of those 5 games. But yeah, no, it was just, an incredible night. And it jump started the whole, it helped jumpstart that whole season, to where Kentucky finished, best record in 41 years, capped it off with that Citrus Bowl win over Penn State. And I think a lot of it started with that Florida game.
Yeah, exactly. I think so too. And Kevin, Kentucky hasn't won back-to-back versus Florida since 76-77. So of course that's the next benchmark that we're looking at here. With these two teams matching up. But there is some confidence in Big Blue Nation. Given what happened last season in this game, and like you just mentioned, the entire season. So far, haven't really been tested by big-time opponents yet early in this season. But Kentucky just kind of methodically is heading into this game 2-0.
Yeah, now, two games against teams for the Mid-American Conference, opened up with actually I think it's a pretty good Toledo team. I think that's a team, they're picked to win, their division in the MAC. And then, Kentucky struggled with them in the first half before finally, kind of waking up, putting them away in the second. And then you had the game last week against Eastern Michigan, where Kentucky got off to a really hot start and then kind of lack of a better term, kind of took their foot off the gas, and then kind of let Eastern Michigan, climb back into it. And then, of course, then you had the injury, with Terry Wilson, which obviously brought things, obviously, put a damper on the whole evening. But yeah, no, it's a big, I think this is, starting the biggest, the toughest stretch for the Cats, this season. You got, it is at home. We have, you have Florida at home, then you go to Mississippi State, and then you go to South Carolina. That's three, that's three pretty tough games back to back to back. But that's life in the SEC. So, but yeah, I think the 2-0 start. I think they've been able to get some of the younger guys. Kentucky lost obviously a ton of guys last year. Debatably, arguably one of the best offensive players in school history, and I think the best went down as the best defensive player in school history. In Benny Snell and Josh Allen, and these first two games have given some of those younger guys a chance to kind of step up, get some playing time, kind of get their feet under them.
Absolutely, Kevin. You did mention Terry Wilson and the injury from last week against Eastern Michigan. What did he mean to this team? He was one of those SEC quarterbacks we were looking at, and taking the next step this season, and his season's over after 2 games. Yeah,
you're exactly right. That's he had you hit the nail on the head. He had really taken a lot of steps, forward this year. You could just see it. He was making better reads. He was, just getting that, that season. People forget, even though he was a sophomore, last year he had never played in a major college football game, and basically you're going out as that starting quarterback in the Southeastern Conference, which, can be a very daunting task. And, he, had some good numbers last year. Like I said, this year he was off to, a great start. He'd completed 63% of his passes for about 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then also, he also had that threat, had run for another touchdown, that threat on the ground. So, he was really starting to come into his own, which is what the coaching staff, Mark Stoops and, offensive coordinator Eddie Grand, those guys, and quarterbacks coach Jaron Henshaw, they were, they talked about all summer. So you're going to see a huge improvement, in Wilson from last year to this year. And we were, just starting to see it. And, it was just an unfortunate injury. He, it was like a 19-yard run and got brought down from behind. It was, basically a horse collar tackle. And it just turned, just awkwardly on that knee, and then ended up with the, the torn patellar, tendon injury. And so, he's, will have surgery, and obviously will be lost for the year. And the hope is that he can come back next year and be, as good as, and just show more of that improvement.
Absolutely. So now it is Sawyer Smith who's going to step in. The transfer from Troy looked pretty good last week versus Eastern Michigan, especially when you have Lynn Bowden and Ahmad Wagner making the catches they did.
Yeah, no, I think, it's kind of, I talked about this on a post I had for Last Word, the other day. It's kind of interesting. Sawyer Smith is basically in a similar, situation as he was last year. Caleb Barker was the starter, for Troy. He went down, I think it was like 6 games into the season, and then Smith came in, and did really well last year. He threw, probably his best game was their last game, when they beat Buffalo in the Dollar General Bowl, threw for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't think they're, this is what they brought him here for. When he was, saying he was, looking for a transfer, Stoops and, Eddie Grant and those guys, like, look, you can come here because, other than Wilson, Kentucky had no one on their roster at the quarterback position that ever played in a college football game. You had Gunnar Hoke, who was the backup, who transferred to Ohio State, and then you had Danny Clark, who was a 3rd-string quarterback, who also left the program. So you're left with, basically you had, they had 2 incoming freshmen, and then a local kid, Walker Wood, who will be, now will be listed as the backup. But, if you listen to what the coaches have said this week, they don't, they'll be a little bit different with the game plan, but I don't think they're going to do a whole lot different. They may, maybe not have some of the, obviously the run plays, that you would do with Wilson, but I look for them, I'm sure we'll talk about this, I look for them to obviously try to establish the run game, but then, as you said, you have Bowden, and then you have, what's kind of become, the secret weapon, and maybe not so secret weapon, kind of a cult favorite now, and Ahmad Wagner, people have, I refuse to say it, but people were, around here are calling him Ahmad Flagner because, he's gotten 5 pass interference calls, on the defense, already this year. I'm like, okay, that's a cute nickname. I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, he's a big target out there. That's one matchup I'm going to keep my eye on for sure. Saturday night. It was the run game, Kevin, that killed Florida last season when they matched up with Kentucky. We know Benny Snell was gone, of course, and but it is this offensive line that Kentucky's bringing to the table will be the best Florida has played in this young season. And the emergence of redshirt freshman Kavasier Smoke, which is probably one of the best names in college football. By the way, to go along with AJ Rose, that'll provide a great test for this Gators defensive front.
Oh, I agree 100%. The preview that I'm working on, they're probably out tomorrow, maybe for the game. I really think that the matchup with Kentucky's offensive line and Florida's defensive line, obviously, the coach speak, the game's always won at the line of scrimmage. But I think that's going to be fascinating to watch because Kentucky has one of the best offensive lines in the SEC, and Florida's defense, they're, year after year, they're always good. But no, you're right. Kavasier Smoke is kind of, as you said, he has one of the best, the best names in football, and he's really, he's really done a lot of good things this year. He had another touchdown that got called back on Saturday because of a penalty. But if you follow Twitter and watch things, if you watch him play, you see national people that he just looks like an SEC running back. He looks like a guy that you would see at in Auburn or Florida, going through the lineage of all the great backs, and he's been really, he's been really one of the bigger, not really a surprise, but he's done better, more things than what people may have even thought. Not to take anything away from AJ Rose. AJ Rose has done, both of them have run for about 170 yards each, I think, give or take a few yards, in these first 2 games. And then you also have another guy, Chris Rodriguez, who's more of a, kind of a bruiser, like the Benny Snell, the Benny Snell type. He's going to run over you rather than try to run around you. Like I said, I look for, coming out early, try to establish that run game with Rose and Smoke. And then, and then if they can get that run game established, then look for them. Obviously Smith has got the arm. Look for those deep, those deep balls because Florida, I don't have to tell you, Florida. I guess you guys have had some issues with the secondary, especially, I guess the status of what C.J. Henderson's kind of up in the air for Saturday.
Yeah, he's doubtful. He wants to play. I don't expect him to play. So mm-hmm. I'll take Mullen for his word when he says he's doubtful. So yeah, I do agree with you there. I think it will be an early dose of that Kentucky run game and trying to open up those big plays down the field, based off of some play action there.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that that they did really well with, that Wilson. I was talking about him coming into his own. That was one of the things, that play action, and then you had that run pass option along with him. Like I said, I don't think you'll see Smith doing that, but, he's more that classic drop back passer. And, I look forward to seeing, what happens, with Bowden, Bowden matching up against, against that secondary. And like I said, also Ahmad Wagner. And then, they have other, a couple other guys, Bryce Oliver and, Alan Daly, a couple guys, younger guys, that was the biggest thing. One of the biggest things coming into the season was who was going to be that number 2 receiver behind Bowden, and right now, Ahmad Wagner's kind of become that guy. And then I also wouldn't put it out of the realm to see, Bowden, maybe possibly line up Bowden in the Wildcat, and maybe run some plays too. Cause he was, a high school, he was quarterback in high school, and he actually, completed they did that on Saturday night, with Wilson lined up at a receiver, Bowden threw is like 32-yard, pass completion. So, you always have that out there too. Kentucky's always loved the Wildcat, and with Benny Snell and Boone Williams before that, you can go on and on, even going back to the days of Randall Cobb. So it wouldn't surprise me just as a change of pace to see Bowden line up, at quarterback some too.
And on the other side of the ball, Kevin, I think Florida will try and take advantage of this rebuilt Kentucky secondary, and see what Felipe Franks can do with go against those Kentucky defensive backs.
Yeah, no, that's the biggest key on that side of the ball. So far the Kentucky's, rebuilt secondary has done pretty well. Obviously, it's against, lesser competition, than you're going to be facing, against, Florida. Like I said, I've been really impressed, with Franks, so far this year. I thought he played pretty well in the Miami game. And then, the game last week, he was almost perfect. I think he was like, 25 out of 27 or something.
Yep.
Through the air. And then Kentucky, as far as the secondary, Kentucky caught a break on this past weekend. Yusuf Corker, who's their starting free safety, was originally penalized for a targeting foul, which meant, he would miss the first half of the game Saturday, but then they went back and looked at the replay, and, they said, no, it wasn't targeting. So, Kentucky caught a break there because he's, even as a sophomore, he's one of Kentucky's most experienced guys. If you look at their depth chart, they start everyone except Jordan Griffin, who's the starting, strong safety, replacing, Mike Edwards there. All of them are freshmen or sophomores, redshirt freshmen or sophomore, Tyrell Agee and Cedric Dort, are sophomores. And then another guy, MJ Devonshire, who's one of their highly touted recruits they got out of Pennsylvania, is another guy who you're going to see a lot, I think, the corner position. But, so far they've done well. But, stepping up, with Franks and, the Florida receivers. And I know Tony, I guess, is out for this game. But still, it's going to be a big step up in competition. And that's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And then the flip side of that is, I think, Kentucky's strongest suit is on the front line. And they're going to hope, kind of like Josh Allen did last year. Obviously, we're not, DeAndre Square, it's a weak side linebacker. It's kind of been a breakout player so far this year. I think, they're going to try to, maybe do some blitzes, some different kind of looks to try to get pressure on Franks, because like I said, the defensive front, front three is probably Kentucky's strongest suit on that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, we just talked about, what we kind of think Florida will do and come out maybe and establish a passing game first. But, part of that's because Florida can't get the run game going in the first two games.
Mm-hmm.
And part of, Felipe Frank's experience will be dependent on that Florida being able to block, this experienced Kentucky front seven, led by seniors, linebacker Cash Daniel, defensive lineman Calvin Taylor, TJ Carter. We just, you just brought out the youth of the secondary, but up front, not only are those guys good, they're bringing a lot of experience. So, this Florida run game is still probably going to have its work cut out for them for the third straight game.
Yeah, I agree. And then you throw in Phil Hoskins, who, another guy who played a lot last year, missed the first two games because of some academic issues. He's, the depth chart, he's listed behind, Calvin Taylor right now, but he's a guy who's played a lot. And, back in the summer was even getting a little bit of, NFL draft buzz, like possibly a lower round, maybe draft pick. So, they have like 6 to 8 guys that they're going to run in and out, probably, rotate in and out, which I think is going to be huge, because it's going to be, I think you guys will feel right at home on Saturday, because it's going to be hot and it was 100 degrees here, yesterday, on September 10th, and it's going to be, pushing, 90s on Saturday with a lot of humidity. So it's probably going to feel like, Gainesville weather for the game on Saturday.
All right, Kevin McGuffy from Last Word on Sports, covering the Kentucky Wildcats there. Kevin, you don't have to give a prediction if you don't want to, but you got any final thoughts on this game as we head into Saturday night?
Well, my prediction, you and I were talking before we got started. I didn't pick Kentucky to win, last year, and they won. So, before the season, I did a predictions blog, and I picked Florida to win this game, and I think I still I was like maybe a 3-point game. I'm going to say Florida by a touchdown. I'm going to say like 24-17. And then obviously for any Kentucky fans listening to this, I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't, Sawyer Smith kind of, we've seen what he can do, but it's, as we said, it's a big, step up between like the Sun Belt or the MAC, playing against MAC teams, and then, playing against that Florida defense. So if he comes in and they don't miss a beat, Kentucky can absolutely win this game. But like I said, I'm going to say 24-17 Florida, and like I said, we'll hope, for all our True Blue fans and the Big Blue Nation, we'll hope I'm wrong.
Kevin, one thing we know for sure, lately when these two teams have matched up, it's been some crazy moments in this game.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. You think about, gosh, what was it, 3 years ago? The triple overtime game with the
Yeah.
disputed delay of game. I know we won't get into that. And then 2 years ago, everybody thought that was going to be the year, that Kentucky was finally going to snap the streak. And it didn't. It what turned into a defensive game. It was like 14-9 or something,
And then
like 14-9.
yeah, and
And
then that game where Kentucky didn't cover receivers.
right, yeah. Then last year, 2 years ago, we don't like to talk about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, where with the come from ahead loss with was it 27-14, yeah, and you guys got 2 touchdowns off of uncovered receivers. Is just, it was the most. That was probably the epitome. What people like to call, you like to say Kentucky's turned the corner. That was like the epitome of the old Kentucky football. Find a way, if there's a way to lose a game, that, they're going to do it. But like I said, but it's gotten, you can see the recruiting, you can see, things have gotten significantly better, every year under Stoops. They've improved, they've either equaled or improved their win totals. Now, I don't know if they're going to win, 10 games this year, but yeah, like I said, it seems to be the last 5 years, something weird, something crazy, has happened in just about every game. So we can only wait and see what happens on Saturday night.
All right, Kevin, before I let you go, let our listeners know what kind of coverage they can get at Last Word on Sports.
Yeah, well, here at like I said, we have Last Word on Sports, and our group is Last Word on College Football. Like I said, I write about Kentucky. We have probably 25 to 30 different writers now. The place is just growing by leaps and bounds. We cover a lot of the teams in the SEC. There's Oklahoma, UCLA. We got a writer for Ohio State now. I think Penn State. Basically, you can go lastwordoncollegefootball.com, or follow them Last Word on CFB on Twitter, and you see basically previews of like all the games going on this weekend, and then recaps, and then we do a weekly Heisman poll that I think just came out today. And then I've been working on, I did one before the season. I'll probably do one. I haven't decided if I'm going to do week 3 or week 4, but do like a bowl projections thing. Spoiler alert, I had you guys playing in the Orange Bowl before the season. So
All right.
We'll see how, we'll see. I haven't seen anything to change that now. So I don't remember who you were playing, but I had you guys playing in the Orange Bowl. So, like I said, there's a lot of great content. We have a writer that covers Florida. Come on, check out the website, check them out on Twitter, give them a follow. There's a lot of great stuff there.
All right, that's Kevin McGuffy from Last Word on Sports, Last Word on College Football, talking Kentucky with us. Kevin, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, David, for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's always great to come on and talk with you.
I know some of you out there like to bet on football, and MyBookie is the place to bet on football every week. Whether you want to make a national bet or wager on this weekend's games, MyBookie has you covered. You guys know I would only recommend a service to my listeners that's proven. That's why MyBookie is always the right play. You bet, you win, they pay. Have some fun with betting this year. MyBookie lets you bet on which college coaches will get fired, who will make the college football playoff, or win the Heisman Trophy. You can even bet on halftime lines, live odds, and if by the second half it looks like your bet is going to lose, you can always just take the other side. Also, MyBookie allows you to bet on FBS versus FCS games. Right now, double your first deposit up to $1,000 at MyBookie. Use promo code Gators to activate the offer. Visit MyBookie online today at mybookie.ag. That's MyBookie.ag. And don't forget to use the promo code Gators when creating your account to claim the bonus. Bet, win, get paid at MyBookie. So let's take a look at what Kentucky was able to do last week versus Eastern Michigan. Before we look at this game even more, Kentucky had a comfortable win. It could have been a little more if you listen to what Kevin said there in the preview. Junior running back A.J. Rose, he coughed up the football on the goal line, keeping the Wildcats from jumping out to a 21-0 lead. Wildcats did force a turnover on the following possession and knocked through a field goal after that. But, so it wasn't a horrible result after that. But, after an interception by Cash Daniel, Kentucky hurt itself again with a holding call on Logan Stenberg, and Cavassier Smoke would have had his second touchdown run of the night if not for that holding call. Wide receivers dropped some passes. Lynn Bowden had a long kickoff return wiped off the board because of a hold. So, despite a 21-point lead, it seemed like Kentucky coasted a little bit after the first quarter. It wasn't all bad for Kentucky. Kentucky had 2 scoring drives of 90 yards or more, and also pretty good on third down, converting 9 of its 14 attempts. A.J. Rose led the team in carries with 17 rushes for 82 yards for the second straight game. But, it's Smoke who's making a strong case of becoming the primary back. Busted loose for a 32-yard touchdown in the first quarter, showing elusiveness to finish the run. Averaged 8.4 yards per carry in the game. Finished the game with 11 carries for 92 yards and 1 touchdown. Something of note there is offensive coordinator Eddie Gran went to Smoke late in the game. He's the only running back at this point of the season not to fumble for Kentucky. Freshman Chris Rodriguez fumbled twice in the season opener. Didn't get a carry against Eastern Michigan. Defensively, Kentucky held Eastern Michigan to 49 rushing yards, so Florida's going to have the work cut out for them there. Eastern Michigan only attempted 22 rushes compared to 53 passes. Eagles quarterback Mike Glass finished 34 of 53 with 2 touchdowns and 337 yards for Eastern Michigan. They did have some success throwing the ball in the first half, but Kentucky still forced 2 turnovers and completely dominated the first half. Guys, so Kentucky, they look a little bit different from the team that broke the streak in the swamp last season. We knew Kentucky was going to lose Josh Allen, Benny Snell, Lonnie Johnson, Mike Edwards, Derek Beatty, Darius West, C.J. Conrad, Butchie Stallings, Jordan Jones, and more from last year's 10-3 Citrus Bowl team. We didn't know they'd be losing Terry Wilson, too, a week before the Florida game. So Kentucky will be starting a new quarterback after Terry Wilson goes down. I mentioned this the last episode, but here's a refresher for Sawyer Smith, who was inserted into the game this past Saturday versus Eastern Michigan. His first pass as a Wildcat, Smith threw a jump ball down the sideline to big wideout Ahmad Wagner. He came down with it and then raced 54 yards for a touchdown. And then on his final pass of the night, Smith found Lynn Bowden in the corner of the end zone for a 2-yard touchdown that he had to go up and get. It was a nice throw and catch, only where Bowden could get it. That provided a final 38-17 margin over Eastern Michigan. Smith finished 5 of 9 passing for 76 yards and 2 touchdowns in his debut. After him playing in this game and along with Terry Wilson, Kentucky has yet to throw an interception in the first 2 games. So a little bit more on Smith. I mentioned this in the last episode too, but refresher just in case you missed it. Filled in last season for Troy as a starter with Caleb Barker, who was lost for the year to a knee injury. Smith came in the 6th game of last season. He went 5-2 as a starter. Completed 144 of 229 passes for 1,669 yards and 14 touchdowns, while also rushing for 191 yards and a score. So got some ability to run, but not really going to be counted on to do it. Completed 18 of 22 attempts for 317 yards and a touchdown in a 26-16 win over Louisiana Lafayette. Completed 21 of 28 passes for 287 yards and a touchdown in the Trojans' 35-21 victory over Georgia Southern, who won 10 games last year. So one of the better teams on the schedule for Troy last year. He still went 21 of 28 for 287 yards. Also, he was named Most Valuable Player for the Dollar General Bowl after leading Troy to a 42-32 win over Buffalo, where he completed 31 of 44 passes and 320 yards with 4 touchdowns. He appeared in 6 games as a freshman for Troy in 2016 before redshirting the 2017 season. So he's got some experience. Tate High School down in Florida is where he went to high school. 2-time Pensacola News Journal All-Area pick. All-State as a senior. Combined for 5,627 yards, 47 touchdowns in his final 2 seasons. So some good stats there as he finished his high school career. As a senior, he was rated as the number 21 dual-threat quarterback in the country by 24/7 and committed to UCF before flipping to Troy. So a little more information there on Smith, who's going to be making his first start of the season. And let's break down this matchup a little bit here. You have to think Kentucky will try and protect quarterback Sawyer Smith a bit with A.J. Rose. He thought to be the number one back, but you got to. I think Kentucky's gonna try and protect him with this run game. It's been redshirt freshman Kavasier Smoke, who's been somewhat of a surprise for Kentucky this year. While he only has 18 carries, he's making the most of it so far with those 18 carries for 170 yards, a 9.44 average with 2 touchdowns. So he's averaging almost 10 yards a carry every time he touches the ball. Almost a first down every time he touches the ball. So Florida would need to watch the big playability there by making sure they tackle better than they did versus Miami. This game reminds me a little bit of the Miami game in that I think the opponent would try and protect the quarterback, and fundamentals will be the difference in this game. Kentucky's offensive line is much better than Miami's, but they haven't faced a pass rush like Florida's. Kentucky's offensive line is graded well in its games versus Toledo. Eastern Michigan only gave up 3 sacks in the first 2 games. And the Wildcats receive Pro Football Focus' 3rd highest pass blocking grade in Week 1 and was recognized as one of the top units in college football in Week 2. Offensive tackle Landon Young, who missed last year's Florida game due to a torn ACL, was named SEC Lineman of the Week in Kentucky's win over Eastern Michigan last week. He and Luke Fortner and Logan Stenberg were named to Pro Football Focus SEC Offensive Team of the Week. Their offensive line has been responsible for 4 total pressures given up to its opponent so far. So only 4 quarterback pressures as well given up there. And Cole Kublick, very highly regarded analyst out there, especially for offensive line, him from the SEC Network, has this Kentucky offensive line as the SEC's best last week. So, I do think Florida is better and the more talented team can really dictate the game with the defensive front, but that starts with tackling Smoke and Rose. I don't think Kentucky will march down the field a whole lot, so it's important not to set them up in good field position with turnovers from the offense and make it easier on their offense. I think they can hit some big runs. So Florida's tackling really, really important. Going back to that Miami game, you can't give up. They stayed in that game because of some of the lack of tackling and the big runs the running backs got. In helping Jaron Williams. So I think the same could happen here for Smith if Florida doesn't tackle well. Matchup to watch on the outside is which cornerback, defensive back covers Kentucky senior wide receiver Ahmad Wagner. You heard him there in the preview with Kevin, but 6'5". 234-pound wide receiver, second on the team, but only 6 catches, but for 128 yards, a 21.3-yard average per catch. And who's going to cover him? Because Lynn Bowden is the most versatile of the Kentucky wide receivers, but I think you need experience to play with the big-bodied Wagner. Kevin mentioned that he has 5 pass interference calls called on him. Defenders guarding him have been called for 5 pass interference calls this year. So I think you may see Marco Wilson on the big-bodied Wagner just a little bit more, just because I think you need the experience going up against a big receiver like that. They'll switch it up, but I do think I tried the athleticism of one of the freshmen, Kyer Elam, Chester Kimbrough with C.J. Henderson out, Jadon Hill, early on against Bowden, and see how that goes, and see where Florida's at. Just trying it that way first. On offense, just like Will Miles and I mentioned on the last episode, this game will be on Felipe Franks on the offensive side. And of course, you can say that about the quarterback position every game. But until we see this run game improve for the Gators, the offensive success comes through Felipe Franks, and that's not necessarily a bad thing right now. This game is going to go a long way for the reputation of Felipe Franks. It really is time for him to lead a charge, lead one early, and put pressure on Kentucky. And I know that was the type of game plan I wanted to see versus Miami. And this is another opportunity to get an inexperienced quarterback with some pressure on him. With Smith, he lacks experience with Kentucky, and this is his first start there. So, with Kentucky's secondary being rebuilt for this season, he only gave up 166 yards passing in Game 1 versus Toledo, but Eastern Michigan was able to throw for 337 yards last week. So this is a chance for Franks to really put together a performance that can carry this team, maybe even open up the run game if you get on them early, and that helps the defense as well, as I think Smith will have trouble fighting from behind there. So this Kentucky defense, while experienced, they still lost 7 starters and 4 of the top 5 tacklers from last year's team. But, still a lot of experience up front, led by seniors, linebacker Cash Daniel, defensive lineman Calvin Taylor, TJ Carter. And this defense is a lot like Miami, where the experience is up front, but young on the back end. So Florida, Florida needs to take care of the ball. I really think they do that. If they do that, they'll be okay. And predicting here a 30-17 Gators win. Play smart, limit turnovers, maybe even create some, as Florida's defense has only forced 1 turnover in the first 2 games. That Kyer Elam interception last week. The other turnover was the fumble punt by Jeff Thomas from Miami. So the defense has only caused 1 turnover in 2 games. Plenty of chances to recover fumbles, but didn't do it. So, and tackle, of course. I don't think I can mention enough how important it is. You go back to last year's Kentucky game, go to the Miami game, first game of the season this year. Tackling was an issue. If Florida gets that fixed, I think they will. Feel pretty good about that 30-17 victory I'm predicting here for the Gators. And I don't want to make this game sound as easy as that, as you just do the basics and you win, and not every game will be like that. But I think this one really does boil down to those simple points. So, everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown. Great preview there from Kevin talking about the Kentucky Wildcats. Be on the lookout for the latest edition of Talking with Troop. That's exclusive on news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. I'll be sharing it on the social media channels, of course. And everybody, just thanks for listening to this episode. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.